Welcome to Oceanside Library's Career Readiness Program. I'd now like to introduce our presenter for this evening, the creator and founder of FindSpark, Emily Meethner. Go ahead, Emily.
Right, great. Well, thank you for having me back, Okaria and the Oceanside Library. Very happy to be here. So as mentioned, my name is Emily Mifner, and I'm the founder and CEO of FindSpark. We are a company that is dedicated to connecting employers to diverse early career talent. We have over 33,000 members, over 500 schools represented, and we've hosted over 300 programs since we got started in 2011. And these are just a few of the companies that we work with. So a big part of what we do is help job seekers connect with great employers and make sure they are standing out and doing all the right things in the job hunt. And just a quick background on my why did I start FindSpark? When I was a college student myself, I felt like there really was a lack of career resources out there, especially when it came to more of the soft skills that are really, really important within the job hunt, like networking and public speaking and building relationships. So I knew I wanted to start something that really emphasizes how important it is to build a strong network for yourself early on in your career. So in addition to running FindSpark, I'm also an adjunct professor. I teach career and social media courses at School of Visual Arts and Fashion Institute of Technology. And I also have my certificate in diversity and inclusion from Cornell. So just a quick note before we get started, I always like to remind folks to just take a minute to turn off other devices, flip them over, put them on silent, close out, the 17 other tabs you may or may not have open. And if you're a phone note taker like me, just grab a pen and paper for notes. Since you already decided to be here, you might as well be fully invested in getting as much out of this as possible. And I also want to acknowledge all of the disruptions that are happening, have happened, and continue to happen because of COVID-19. And one, it's okay to be disappointed. I don't know anyone whose career goals or path have not been disrupted in some way, big or small. And whether you feel like in the grand scheme of things, things that are happening to you are big or small, I think it's okay to let yourself be disappointed. Also knowing that things are changing really rapidly. So what we're going to talk about today, leveraging social media in your job hunt, is really important because you want to keep updated with the industry and what's happening and the type of roles that you are going to be applying for. Of course, also no one has all of the answers. There's a ton of uncertainty, but at least we all know that everyone feels pretty uncertain right now. But this event is going to be positive and fun, and we will get through this. And a huge thing we'll be talking about is how you can continue to grow and maintain your network, which has always made the job hunt easier. And now in times like this, it's even more important. So what is the point of everything we're going to discuss today? So we're talking about social media, but really what we're talking about is how can you find relevant information, relevant openings, and relevant people? And then also, how can you get found by the right people? And in other words, this is all about growing and maintaining your network and using social media to do those things. So before we dive in, I think it's important to take a minute to just think about you, right? So one, you are more than just a resume. So always remember that. Yes, the resume is important, but that's not the only thing that matters. And social media is a great way to show off other aspects of your personality and your career. It's also a great place to let people know what your values are. What are you passionate about, and what do you really care about? It's much easier to show your unique background through platforms like social media versus just a resume. And you need to be thinking about, especially in this day and age where everything is digital, what are you putting out there? What are people able to learn about you online? So let's dive right in. First and foremost, you need to remember that your bios are your pitch, right? We've all heard the phrase, the elevator pitch. What happens if you happen to get in the elevator with a recruiter who works at your dream company? You need to be able to give that pitch, what your experiences are, what sort of your goals you have coming up in a short period of time. And so that's how you should think about your social media bios. What is the background, the important things that you want people to learn about you? And every social media platform is going to give you a little bit different amount of space, amount of characters. You'll be able to get more or less creative depending on which platform it is. But you want to, one thing I encourage you to do is think about what are 2 to 3 keywords that are really important to you in your career, and make sure that those 2 to 3 keywords are in every version of every social media bio you might have. So Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, because that consistency is nice to see. You also want to consider using parts of the profile creatively to add on to that bio. So you only have so much space within that bio, but you can use things, other features creatively. So for instance, on Instagram, you have Instagram story highlights. And so these are story posts that you can keep at the top of your profile right under your bio, no matter what's been posted in your newsfeed. So this is a great place to potentially talk about work. So for instance, on the left, I have one of my former students from SVA. She has a story highlight for her dog, which is just a fun thing to know. G2 Rock, which I believe is her makeup, sort of a hobby. She's very into cosmetics. And then she has the mill, and the mill is where she works. So the mill, that highlight is filled with behind the scenes of what she does at work. And then she's also got a highlight for her thesis film, which is a big part of people in the computer animation industry once they graduate. So right off the bat, it's a great profile. It's got a lot of information, but then it also has, some other information in the story highlights as well. On Twitter, for instance, there is a feature called a pinned tweet. And the pinned tweet means that as you post daily or weekly or however often you post, the pinned tweet will always stay at the top of your profile. So this is a really good place to put something like a link to your personal website, or maybe some sort of award or something that's really important to you. So it's an extra space to talk about yourself that shows up underneath your bio. And one of my biggest tips when it comes to LinkedIn is to make sure you have a strong headline. And I know I've been talking about pitches, and so I would love for the folks in the room to share what you would say your elevator pitch is, just so I can get a sense for who's in the room. So you can just share a quick one-liner in the chat, what you've done in the past, what you're doing now, what your upcoming goal is. So your LinkedIn headline is one of the most underutilized parts of LinkedIn. Most people think that the headline space, which appears right under your name, is just for your title, whatever it is you're doing currently. And yes, you should have that, but there's a ton more space there that you can use to tell people more about what you're all about and what type of roles you're looking for. And so this is a good place to think about, to sort of do some reverse engineering. So think about who do I want to get found by, and what would they be looking for, right? So for instance, if I'm a web designer like John, and I'm looking for projects specifically within, or part of my expertise is e-commerce websites, right? Because web design is really broad. So if you only have web designer in your headline, that could mean a lot of things. But if you put web designer with a focus on e-commerce, and then you also list out BigCommerce, BigCommerce, Shopify, and WooCommerce. If I'm a potential client and I'm searching on LinkedIn for web designer, and all I see is web designer in the results, but then I see your profile, and in the results I see your headline and it says Shopify, and I have a Shopify account, then I'm like, okay, that's the person I want to talk to before I'm going to go through all of these generic web designer profiles. Because as you can see here, as I just explained, when people search keywords in LinkedIn, one of the few things that shows up is not just your name and your photo, but your headline. again, most people think that the headline, you can see here, for instance, these people that show up just as, what their job titles are, but that's actually their headline, and they just have chosen to only include their job title. So think about, what else could you add there that will show more? This is also what people see when you go to connect with them on LinkedIn as well. So again, really important, one of the first things that people see. So really utilize that space. So again, what to think about, including your role, what is your focus within that role? So get more specific. You can talk a little bit about things you've done in the past, keywords that you want to get found for, and then if you want to put something extra. So maybe there's something that you don't think a recruiter or someone who might be wanting to hire you would ever put in, but maybe it's something that's important to you, like a hobby. And when it comes to social media, there are, of course, a lot of platforms that exist. So there's the big ones like LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Then there are other platforms that are more specific for certain niches. So for instance, if you're a web designer, you might be on GitHub, which is more for coding and engineering, software engineering. You might be on Behance or ArtStation, which is specific more to creatives. So, there's a lot out there that you can do. I recommend focusing on 1 to 2 platforms in terms of where you spend a lot of your time. And maybe you have multiple, it's a good idea to have profiles on multiple platforms, but if you really invest time and energy on building up a following and relationships on one, that's always a nice thing. And if you are actively job searching, it's a good idea to try to consistently post a few times a week. And we'll talk more about what types of things you can actually post about. And who should you network with? This is a broad question, but I like to throw out a few things to think about when you're considering who to reach out to when you are interested in connecting with others because you're on the job hunt. So of course, recruiters, number one. And, a lot of recruiters are very open and honest about how they want to connect with people. So sometimes you'll see recruiters who are very active across multiple social media channels, and they might even say, feel free to connect with me, and then there's other recruiters who you'll see in their LinkedIn profiles, they say, please do not send me messages, apply directly on the job board. So you use those context clues or direct messages to determine, who you should spend your time reaching out to. The next thing to think about is just picking folks who you genuinely admire. So following people in the industry whose work really impresses you, and that could be people who are at the same level as you or above you or below you in terms of experience level. People who are speakers, leaders in the industry, or teachers like adjunct professors or do programs like this, those folks are often good targets because they obviously are already showing an interest in sharing their expertise. And then, of course, focusing on people who are active online. You're going to be more likely to get responses from people who you can tell are actively updating their profiles or posting. And social media is an incredible tool for research. And one of the best ways to stand out in the job hunt is to do lots of research, especially now with things changing so rapidly. So you can obviously look for what roles are available. A lot of companies, depending on how large they are, might even have dedicated social media accounts just for job updates. So I recommend a little exercise where you follow at least 10 companies on a platform of your choice, 10 companies that you're interested in working for. Then through research, follow 5 people at each of those companies on the platform of your choice. So these could be people you see on the careers page, you see or see on the team pages, you see mentioned in the news, mentioned on their social channels or tagged. And then, so that's 10 companies, 50 people, and then pick 2 people at each company, so 10 folks, to actually reach out to after you've followed them for a while, you've seen some of their posts and updates, and you feel like you can make a really genuine, nice message of outreach to them, expressing your interest in an informational interview or some sort of networking experience. And it's also a great way, social media is a great place to do research for roles you're applying for companies you're interested in. You can learn things like, what did people do before they got into the job that your type of job you're looking for? How long do they stay at companies? Or is this a place where people are staying a long time, or do you see a lot of turnover? Where do people go after? You can see trends, and a lot of people go from this company to that company. You can, of course, learn about people's accomplishments. So what are the types of projects people are doing? A lot of people are very open on social media about the projects they're working on. And then, of course, you can learn things about how big are certain companies and teams. And when it comes to deciding where to reach out to people, you really want to use your judgment, because it's not always an easy answer. So not everybody is active on LinkedIn. You can make some assumptions, like, for instance, more conservative industries or roles. People might be most active on LinkedIn because LinkedIn is very much 100% professional. But then, say, a platform like Instagram is very popular for creative people, more creative roles, and also, of course, just popular in general. And a lot of people use it as a way to talk about work. So, as a personal example, I planned a political event recently over the summer, and I went to a company's team page and found someone I thought would be a really great speaker for my event. And this is the world of politics. And so you would assume that this person would be, active on LinkedIn. It's a more, politics is a more conservative industry, you could say. And so I did connect with this person. Her name is Shaniqua. I connected with her on LinkedIn at first, and I sent a custom LinkedIn message inviting her to speak at my event. And I didn't hear from them. And then I did a little more research, and I saw that they were active on Instagram. And what I mean by active, so they weren't posting a lot of feed posts, but I could see that almost all the time they had some sort of story up on their Instagram stories. And I also could tell from, for instance, her Instagram bio, she talks about where she works, that she went to Harvard Kennedy School, she used to work on the Hill, and links also to her Twitter account. But so, she's talking about her job on Instagram. It was not a place where she was only talking about personal matters. So I used all of those things to decide to reach out to her on Instagram as well. And that is where I ended up getting a response from her as an Instagram DM reply really quickly. So, it's not always obvious where people might be most responsive. So you want to do that research. It's also a smart idea to take some time as you begin to use social media more to network and on the job hunt to actually curate your news feeds. So whether that is Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn, we all see updates from people that we just don't find helpful. They don't put us in a good mind space. They're not useful. And maybe they make us feel bad for whatever reason. Take the time to mute those posts and mute those people. You can mute people on every platform and still stay connected with them. So the person will never know that you decided to turn off their posts. On most platforms, you can also choose to sort your news feed by top or most recent. I recommend choosing most recent because that then puts the algorithm in less control. If you do by top, it's going to be the posts that get the most engagement, and that might not be the most useful stuff for you. So I like just seeing the things that are most recent first. A place that is a great place to create news feeds of useful content is Twitter. And you might think that Twitter is very overwhelming because oftentimes a lot of people are following a lot of folks. And so it's just a lot of tweets, a lot of information. But there's a feature on Twitter called lists. And so you can make Twitter lists of particular people. You can make that list public or private. And then you can look at the news feed of just that list. So that's really nice. For instance, You could make, as a job seeker, a list, a private Twitter list of only the company news feeds that you're interested in working for, or only thought leaders in the space that you're interested in getting into. And then you can occasionally, on your own time, go to those news feed, go to that Twitter news feed of that particular list for updates. What's going on in the industry? What are these people talking about? And that's going to make you a more educated job seeker. You can also find people through hashtags on Instagram and Twitter. You can search hashtags related to events. So for instance, Comic-Con is coming up, and a lot of different organizations and companies are doing programming and events and will be talking about Comic-Con. So you can search different hashtags related to Comic-Con and find people to network with. You can also search hashtags related to topics. So, look into what are hashtags used by, say, people in the web design industry, and look for people that way. You can also search by locations. This is a little bit less relevant now that events aren't happening, but once events start happening again, you can search by locations. For instance, when there's a large event happening, say at the Javits Center, you could search posts that were posted in that location to find people. You can also look for folks who are tagged in industry posts on industry related platforms like media publications that cover industry news that's related to what you're interested in. And then you can also follow accounts that you follow, which sounds a little convoluted, but for instance, if there is a Twitter or Instagram feed of a media publication that's relevant to your industry, look and see who does that media publication follow, and they're probably following other relevant accounts, people, and thought leaders. And then of course you want to use social media to engage with your network. You want to do whatever you can to create notifications, right? That little red dot that says someone has acknowledged my existence. That's really what people live for on these platforms. And so how can you create notifications through your posts as a way to stay engaged and connected with your network? So when it comes to what to post on social media, I like to categorize what I believe are good posts into 4 different pillars. So one would be helpful content. What content do you think will be helpful to your network? So sharing resources or events. Shouting out other people. So congratulating your colleagues, people you admire when they've had milestones happen in their careers. Interesting content, so this is pretty broad, but what is interesting news to you that's going on in your industry will likely be interesting to your network. And then of course, don't forget to share accomplishments and things that you're working on, whether that's going to events, talking about continuing education that you've attended, say webinars and things like this, or side projects, personal projects, and that sort of thing. So some examples of posts. Here is somebody who is preemptively talking about the fact that their job is going to end soon. So they want to make it really clear that they're going to be up for grabs. So they're talking about that they've been very lucky to be employed through COVID, but that their contract is coming to an end. And they have a link to their portfolio and resume, and also include a bunch of relevant hashtags to the type of role that they are looking for. This is somebody's Instagram account. They are a senior editor at Forbes, so they're a journalist. They've also used to work at InStyle and Self and Harper's Bazaar. So they posted on Instagram stories about a podcast that they were featured on. So definitely talking about thought leadership opportunities that you've engaged with. You can also just share other people's posts. So on all platforms, but say essentially Twitter, there's the retweet button, or even on LinkedIn, you can click share and you can just share a post from somebody else or a company account as is to just easily show the type of things you're engaging with. And then of course also posting articles if you've ever been featured or again are featured in an article or quoted. or say have spoken at an event. And shouting out other people, right? So whenever you can, tag people in your posts, whether that's LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram, tag other accounts in those captions because those people will be more likely to see it. So for instance, I am a Hofstra University alumni and I spoke on a panel about careers in media and marketing, and the person at the Hofstra Career Center who brought me in to speak put in a nice screenshot, which I would say she picked a pretty good screenshot of all of us looking okay, which is a pretty big feat when it comes to screenshots of Zoom meetings. But she tagged all of us, and then she also used relevant hashtags like hashtag Hofstra and hashtag Hofstra Pride. And so this post got a good amount of engagement because not only is she posting it to her network, but when I engage with it, then my network could potentially see it. So the more you can tag people and shout them out, the more reach that post will likely get. And then, of course, talking about the things that you're doing, especially when it comes to professional development or going to events. If you're a job seeker right now, there are tons of virtual events, many and most of them free, happening all over the internet. So these are great things to talk about, to shout out the speakers, to shout out the people who are organizing it, to show that you're active in the industry and learning and continuing to network. And now I want to close up before we get to Q&A with just a couple of quick bonus tips. So on LinkedIn, there is a new feature where you can add the pronunciation of your name. I think this is really nice, even if you maybe feel like you have an easy to pronounce name. It just takes the awkwardness out of having to meet someone new. If there's a scenario where you might have to say someone's name in whatever context, it's just a nice feature. And especially if you know you have a more complicated, less common name, it's nice. It's just great. It's a great new feature, and I think is something to consider adding. And also, LinkedIn has always been a place where I recommend that if you're looking for work and you're not currently employed, then you should let people know you're looking for work. And now more than ever, you should not be ashamed if you're looking for work. There are millions of people out of work because of the pandemic, and everything is just more competitive. So you should really make it easy for people to know that you are open to work and ready to be hired. So LinkedIn actually has this new feature where you can add this open to work image frame for your profile picture. So if you just go onto LinkedIn and you see someone who has it, if you click their profile, it'll let you add it to yours. And so that's more on the front end, but then you also want to go to your settings on the back end where you can put your job preferences, and these will only be seen to people who have LinkedIn Recruiter versions of LinkedIn. So basically people who are official HR and recruiter, talent acquisition folks will be able to see what locations will you work, when are you available to start, what types of jobs, full-time, part-time, consulting, and then job titles. So make sure you have all this filled in so you get found by people who are looking for talent like you. And then, of course, as mentioned, now more than ever, it is a very competitive landscape, no matter what industry you're interested in, and especially those that have been heavily impacted by the pandemic. And so you should really think about what can you do that is extra. If you're overwhelmed by what I've talked about so far, then start with the basics of just having an active profile, posting and engaging with people on social media. But if you feel like you're ready to take it to the next level and want to stand out in the job hunt, think about how you can put yourself out there in a way that a lot of other people aren't. So that would include things like creating a personal website, having a blog, or creating articles, whether that's on LinkedIn, a website, or Medium, where you talk about your work or the industry. Maybe you're creating videos where you talk about your expertise. Maybe you're going on other platforms that are less used, like Pinterest or TikTok. And then consider doing independent projects or group projects that will help develop your skills and keep you active, that you just do on your own, that you can add to your portfolio and talk about in resumes. And then those and interviews. And then those are things that you can also post about on your social media channels. And I want to emphasize that persistence is key. So posting on social media, connecting with people, engaging with your network, it's really about, building up that career karma. And you never know what could happen, but persistence is really important. And if you're doing these things where you're connecting with people after you apply for jobs online, before you apply for jobs online, that's really what's going to make you stand out, because most people do not do that. Most people just apply for a job online and that's it. And so you really want to do more than that. And so as we wrap up, please put questions in the chat if you have any. And I always like to give example action items. So it's really easy to get inspired at events like these, but I want to make sure you have ideas of, okay, how do I put this into action in a way that's not overwhelming? And now these are just examples, so come up with your own, of course, but I encourage you to make sure that your action items are measurable, they're quantifiable, and that they are not just something like to get better at social media, right? Because that could mean anything. So for instance, you could set a certain number of people you want to add on whatever platform you're interested in growing. You can adjust your bio and update your bio on each platform, and you could set a reminder to update that once every month or 2 months. You could make sure that you're reaching out to at least 1 to 2 people who you admire on social media each week to network. Follow 5 new people each day or week on social media whose career path interests you. Connect with people before you go to events. So if you're going to an event and they're promoting who the speaker is, connect with that speaker on whatever platforms they're active on in advance and say, hi, I'm going to be attending your upcoming event. I really look forward to hearing you speak. And doing that sort of thing beforehand it makes such a big difference, again, because most people don't do it. And you already have a foot in the door before the event even happens. And then, of course, I do want to take the time to emphasize that it's important to set boundaries for social media use, because it can be very overwhelming. These platforms are built and designed to keep us on them as much as possible. And so it's very easy to get sucked in and to get lost and to use them in not productive ways. So come up with guidelines and sort of systems that work for you so that you are not a slave to the platform, but you're using it in a way that works for you. So for instance, I actually recommend turning off all notifications for any social media platforms or apps. I do not have any social media. I don't actually have any notifications at all on my phone except for text messages and phone calls. That way you can check the platforms when you're ready and you're not constantly being buzzed to check them when other people are, tagging or mentioning you. So again, please ask any questions either privately or to the group. And if you did enjoy this talk, I would definitely recommend signing up for free to become a member at findspark.com. It's a free platform and we've got a lot of great resources there, articles, and we do virtual events as well. You can also join our FindSpark Facebook group. We have a FindSpark LinkedIn group. And you can also follow us on FindSpark for Instagram for productive career tips. And also, you're here, so I want to make sure that you all are appreciative of yourselves for taking the time to be here. All right, and now let me go to the chat. I've seen a few questions. Let's see. So, just making my chat smaller so I can read it. Okay. What is an easy platform to use for blogging? So the ones that I would recommend, one, LinkedIn has a place where you can write articles. So if you're already actively using LinkedIn, you might want to use their blog style platform to publish articles, and you have a built-in network to share it with. There is also a new platform called Medium, which is very easy to use. And it's also a bit of a community in itself. And so when you share within Medium, you have a chance of being found by other people who use that platform. And then if you have a personal website, like Wix or Squarespace or WordPress, they all come in with built-in blog features. So those are all great options. Let's see. What is the most appropriate way to contact someone privately on their social media channels about open jobs, especially if they're not recruiters? Great, great question. So it is good to do this, right? It's good to find people who are connected to open roles. And it depends on your strategy. So the thing is with job hunting in general, it's definitely good to apply for roles as soon as possible. So as soon as you see them go up, you don't want to wait a week or 2 weeks to apply because it could be closed by that time. So what I recommend is applying for the job, doing your research, sending in a really great application. And then once you apply, then you can reach out to people and say, hey, John Doe, I recently applied for the web designer role at, your company. I'm really excited about the opportunity. I think I would be a great fit because of X and Y, so give a kind of brief, a really tiny mini cover letter as to why you're a good fit. I was hoping you'd have a few minutes to chat about what your experience has been like at the company, so something like that. And again, use your judgment to decide, which platform to reach out to them on based on where you feel and can see that they're most active. All right. Any other questions?
There was one question I saw that said, will this remain a trend in recruitment? Are recruiters more
Oh,
likely to consider your social media?
yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Number one, I would say is LinkedIn is not going away anytime soon. LinkedIn is owned by Microsoft. It's an enormous company and it is used by the vast majority of recruiters in some way, shape, or form. And recruiters have most recruiters pay for a more advanced, specialized version of LinkedIn where they can do a lot of keyword searching and bulk reaching out to people and that sort of thing. So if you're on any platform, and it should 100% be LinkedIn, you should at least have a profile there because again, really all recruiters are using it. When it comes to platforms like Twitter or Instagram, that's a little more dependent on your industry. At the end of the day, hiring managers are people and people are curious. And so if you're being considered for a role and, you get into say top 3 or, top smaller number of candidates and you're about to be interviewed by someone, there's a good chance they're going to Google you. So keep that in mind. So if, whether or not you decide to have a profile, active profiles on these platforms, you should definitely Google yourself in an incognito window, in a private window, so it's not based on your search history, and just see what comes up. And anything that you don't like, do your best to, delete or hide. But, if you are proactively posting content on a website, on a LinkedIn, on social media channels that is professional or partially professional and maybe personal, but personal in a way you're okay with, that's going to create more positive content for people to see.
Thank you so much, Emily. That was great. If anyone has any other questions, they could write, but those were some excellent questions that you got.
Yes, definitely. And I encourage folks who are watching live or also watching the recording, please feel free to add me on LinkedIn. That is where I'm the most active, but I'm also on Twitter or Instagram. So I welcome any connection requests on any of those platforms. You can find me at Emily Mitzner. And again, you can also follow FindSpark on all social media platforms.
Awesome. Thank you. And also your cat backpack business. You should mention that as well.
Sure. Yeah. So in addition to running FindSpark, I also have another business that I started with my husband, and we sell cat travel products. So you can go to yourcatbackpack.com if you want to check that out. If you're interested in e-commerce and that world, always happy to talk about that as well, and to talk about cats, of course, which my lovely host tonight, Okaria, I know appreciates that as well as a cat person. So yes, and you'll see that I do talk about the travel cat business on my LinkedIn profile as well.
Yeah, oh my God, the backpack is the coolest. I own one myself and it's one of the coolest inventions. So I recommend it.
Well, thank
Thank you, Emily. Thank you so much. Here, let me end the recording here.